Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Figment for the Nintendo Switch. And while no matter what kind of gamer you may be, a quick look at the graphics of this game may garner it some very well-deserved attention, something that might surprise you about the game is who it was meant to be enjoyed by. But not to get too deep into the weeds this early in the review, we're going to start by looking at the story, which is actually just about as simple as it is complicated. Throughout the entire game of Figment, we're playing as Dusty, a somewhat melancholy, somewhat apathetic hero who's accompanied by his chirpy sidekick Piper. And while the straightforward overarching game objective is merely to get back Dusty's lost photo album, the real story is actually wrapped up far beyond the visual presentation of the adventure through the left and right sides of the brain, and exists as a nested story wherein the entire gaming world you're playing through is really just a visual and audio metaphor for the stress and troubles and darker thoughts wrapped up in the mind of a little girl. And if that does sound like a lot of information, don't worry, I have blown none of the mystery for the game. That is so far from a spoiler. But moving into the actual gameplay, it's pretty much what you would expect from any top-down action-adventure game, despite being a somewhat more isometric character perspective. Of course, there will be areas to explore, a good bit of backtracking to be done, some real-time combat, but the real focus of the entire game is on the puzzling. Figment itself is divided up into two distinctly different gaming worlds, the left and right brain. And within each of those worlds are several very different levels designed after brain mechanics or certain experiential sectors of the brain, all having their own unique themes. But whether you're working your way through the auditory centers of the brain or nodes of higher thinking, most of the puzzle mechanics will be very similar regardless of which areas you're playing in. And so the puzzles themselves can kind of be reduced down to finding and placing batteries to activate certain devices, turning dials, or occasionally planting a seed to grow your own land bridge. But as I mentioned previously, puzzling isn't the only thing that Figment has to offer. There is also that real-time combat element. And while the combat is not really intense by any stretch of the imagination, you will have to get a handle on the combat system, as encounters with mobs or the game's occasional bosses will lock up gameplay until you're able to pass. But with controls as simple as pressing Y to attack or B to dodge roll, it doesn't really take that long to get a handle on it. Looking at the game's presentation, though, is probably its biggest sell, regardless of what type of gamer you are. I mean, just looking at it's absolutely beautiful, and everything seems to be like a hand-painted diorama in a truly artful and storybook fashion. Every single area, whether you're in the left or the right or the corpus callosum between both lobes, well, everything about the game is completely brilliant as a visual metaphor for what's going on not only in the brain, but also outside of the brain in that larger story context. And so, moving into a bit for the audio, if you do pay attention to Piper and Dusty, and a bit about what the denizens of the brain actually say, you'll be picking up on some more hidden subtext for the general overarching story that becomes much more clear the deeper you get into the game. Audio-wise, though, Figment is probably one of the best sound-directed games I've played for a while. Everything about the audio package is just, it's done to the nines. Every single thing has its own unique mechanic, and it doesn't just add to the backdrop of the game. The audio effects are actually worked in intrinsically to the puzzles and into the story itself. And every feature of the sound package, whether it's a little chirping birdhouse slowly powering down as you pull away its battery, or the somewhat Disney-style songs that each of the bosses sing, well, I can't argue that at points it was pretty goofy, but it was always really enjoyable. But after all of this praise that the game really does deserve, it doesn't exactly mean that it's completely without its flaws. Though what a flaw is certainly up to dispute depending on what type of gamer you are. Thankfully though, this is one of the few indies I've played where its first note of recognition isn't its price versus its length. Especially right now, while Figment is on sale for a pretty low price, it does offer 5 hours or more of gameplay depending on how long it takes you to explore. And so while its real critiques aren't in its price, its length, its audio or visuals, or even really in its gameplay for that matter, the real thing that you might want to be aware of is possibly its target demographic. Overall, the writing, the jokes, the small references that are sprinkled in throughout the entirety of the gameplay are most certainly designed for a more seasoned gamer, if not just a more seasoned adult. But considering the difficulty and challenge level of not only the puzzles but the combat in Figment, well, it's hard to make any argument that it wasn't designed with a younger gaming audience in mind. And so while any adventure gamer fans will probably find a good amount of entertainment in Figment, it may be a much more enjoyable experience for a younger gamer that might actually see a moderate challenge as pushing them to a bit of their limits. Otherwise, because puzzles are fairly easily recognizable and it's really simple to figure out exactly how to solve them just at a glance, certain more seasoned adventure or puzzling gamers might feel themselves getting just a little bit bored with the potential need to backtrack so far just to enact its solution. And if you're a fan of real-time combat games, well, the combat certainly wasn't intended to be the challenging portion or the focus of the game. So with those considerations in mind, taking a step back and looking at Figment as a whole, I'd have to say it was honestly one of the better indie gaming experiences I've had so far this year. The sheer scope of obvious effort put into the development and orchestration of Figment just makes it an incredibly enjoyable experience with some really powerful undertones. And so maybe it might not be the most action-packed challenging game for fans of the adventure and action-adventure genres. If you're a pure puzzling fan, or if you're a fan of walking sims, then you may really want to get this one, especially while it's on sale. But if you are looking for a little bit more intense combat, and by a little I mean a lot, I would probably advise you check out our review for Jotun Valhalla Edition. Because while it does fall in the same type of gaming category, the combat is much more intense. But anyway, that does about wrap up the review for Figment now on the Nintendo Switch, so if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a comment or a like to show your support. And don't forget to click on that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content, because there are thousands of indie games out there, and new and unique ones are coming out every single day. And so whether it's an easy hard pass or an absolutely unforgettable gem, chances are if it's on the Switch, you're going to find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.